In this video, I'm going to be comparing the very popular Phantom LUTs on the Sony FX6 against a paid plugin called CineMatch for Premiere Pro and DaVinci Resolve. Here's the story. From my observation, the Phantom LUTs are very popular with Sony shooters, and essentially what these do is take your S-Log3 footage and then convert it to that ARRI look that so many people, including myself, really like. The footage that you're looking at right now is currently being shot on the Sony FX6, and I'm using the Sony 35mm f1.8 at f2.8 to get a bit of separation between myself and the background. And right now I'm using the Sony FX6 Phantom Lut Neutral. And there are a variety of different LUTs that you can purchase to give you a bit more of a creative look. But typically, if I'm using Phantom LUTs, I'll be using the neutral one. Of course, you don't have to just simply drag and drop the LUT onto your footage and leave it at that. You can go further and tweak the colors and tweak the image to make it look more like what you would want for your personal preference. If you like the look of these LUTs and want to find out more, there's a link in the description below for you to be able to find out a little bit more about these LUTs and also purchase them. And disclaimer, this video is not a paid promotion. This is me just giving you some information about the different tools, tips and tricks that I use with the Sony FX6. All the opinions that I give in this video are my own. Now moving on to CineMatch, which is a paid plugin for Premiere Pro and DaVinci Resolve. Currently, as of recording, there is no plugin available for Final Cut Pro. It has been reported that there will be a Final Cut Pro version in the future. However, it isn't here yet. Also for M1 Mac users, now that Premiere Pro is native to M1, so is the CineMatch plugin as well. If you download the version 1.06, that will now be native on Premiere Pro if you are using those Mac computers that have the M1 chip. Being a Final Cut Pro user and a Premiere Pro user, I'm very interested in Final Cut Pro being able to support CineMatch, so hopefully that update comes very soon. And how do I use CineMatch? Well, there are two main reasons that I would use this plugin. The first is if I'm shooting a project with multiple cameras and they aren't necessarily the same camera. For a lot of my videos, if I'm doing a 2-camera interview or just using 2 cameras on a video project for B-roll, I'll be using as my A camera the Sony FX6, which I'm recording with right now, and for my B camera, I will use the Sony a7S III. When using these 2 different cameras on a single project, having CineMatch available to be able to line up the colors as much as possible is really helpful. This plugin does support a variety of cameras, and you can check out which cameras are supported on the website. I've left a link in the description below, and new versions of this plugin do come out regularly, updating the different cameras that are supported as well, which is really helpful. If for some reason there is a camera that you use that isn't supported, you can go on the website and then also request a camera to be added to the plugin. From my personal experience, when recording with 2 different cameras doing a sit-down interview and then trying to get the images to line up as much as possible, it has been kind of hit and miss. Honestly, it could be a little bit of user error. However, I have found that for best results, you really do need to do custom white balances and try to get your settings to line up as much as possible. So obviously similar exposure, ISO, shutter, all that kind of stuff. One example, which I don't have footage to show you because I've deleted it, but a few months ago, I did try to line up my Sony FX6 with my Panasonic Lumix S1, and both cameras had a 24-105 f4 lens. However, the Sony had the Sony version and the Panasonic S1 had the Lumix version. And although they were the same types of lenses, they were still 2 different types of lenses. And when I tried to line up the 2 different shots, I could probably get the colors to be matching as much as possible, but the character of the 2 different lenses was a little bit too different for me and was a little bit too distracting to be able to call it a perfect match between the 2 different cameras when shooting an interview. This inevitably was one of the reasons why I ended up selling my Panasonic S1. Originally, I was going to have my FX6 as my A camera and then my B camera be the Panasonic S1. But when I saw the 2 different looks and how they didn't line up as much as I'd really wanted them to, I decided to sell my S1 and then get the Sony a7S III just so I'd be able to use the same lenses on the 2 different camera bodies. And I mention this because when using this plugin, you might be able to get the colors to line up as much as possible, but there might still be a little bit of a different look depending on the lenses that you choose between the 2 different cameras or multiple cameras that you're trying to match up in your project. And the other reason I use this plugin is because I want to be able to tell my editing software, yes, this is Sony FX6 footage, but I want it to look like an ARRI Alexa. And you can do that by using this plugin. The The way CineMatch works is you tell the plugin what kind of camera footage that you're shooting with. So in my case, I tell the plugin that the make is Sony, that the model is the FX6, and that the profile is S-Log3 S-Gamut3.cine, and the data range is limited. Then I choose the target settings, and in this case, I choose the make to be Ari, the model to be Alexa, the profile to be Log-C, and the data range to be limited. I then click Apply Rec. 709 Transform, and there's my beautiful image. I can then adjust the look with exposure, color temperature, and also use different exposure guides like middle gray, skin tones, and tint guide. And if I forget what any of this means, I can then click the false color guide link here, and it will pull up a website that will give me the workflow guide to explain everything to me again, just in case I forgot. Below that, I can do refinements, and the main one I touch is the Hue vs. Hue Adjustment, and I use this for skin tones. So I'll grab the color picker for source, click on the skin tones, and then adjust the curve to my eye, normally dragging it up just a little. That's how I use this refinement, but I think the main reason that this is here is so you can match your colors from one clip to another. So that's why there's a source and a target. But if I'm just color correcting a single clip and not trying to match it to another camera, this is typically the workflow that I will use. There's also secondary color controls, but typically I don't touch these. And then below that, you can generate a LUT, which I find extremely helpful. Because Final Cut Pro doesn't support CineMatch yet, if I'm wanting to do an edit inside Final Cut Pro, but still get the looks that I can get from CineMatch, a workaround is to go into Premiere Pro, put my footage in there, put CineMatch on, and then create the look that I'm going for, and then export that LUT, and then import that into Final Cut Pro. Yes, as I said, this is a workaround and a few extra steps, but if I really want to edit inside Final Cut Pro, this is what I need to do currently to be able to do that until Final Cut Pro supports or gets the CineMatch plugin. Being able to export a LUT is also really helpful because I can then import it into my Sony FX6 and monitor it that way. And I can also send the LUT off to other editors who I collaborate with. So I collaborate with other editors and other agencies. And if I'm shooting for them and I don't want to give them a baked in image of S-Cinetone, or I just want to send them S-Log3 footage so they have as much flexibility as possible with the color grade and look in post, I could also send them through a LUT and show them what kind of look I was going for when shooting the footage. And finally, there's standard controls, which line up with the above settings we've already played with. One thing to note, I do find that CineMatch is a bit taxing on my computer. I'm currently editing with the M1 Mac Mini, and even though it's the 16 gig version, I do still get some warnings popping up from Clean My Mac about heavy memory usage. From my experience, it has been dependent on how complex my timeline is. So if I have multiple cameras in multiple layers, all with CineMatch on, it will slow my computer down just a little bit. So that is something to be aware of. One workaround would be to do your color correcting right at the start or even at the end, and then convert that to a LUT, as I mentioned earlier, and then disable the CineMatch plugin as well. And then that might make your editing experience a little bit more smoother. And that's a basic overview of the Phantom LUTs and CineMatch. And hopefully you found this helpful and gives you a bit of insight as to why you might go with the Phantom LUTs or why you might go with CineMatch. If you found this video helpful, please give it a like. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to this channel for more videos on video creation in the future.